We are told from the beginning that happiness is the prize and pain is the price. That if we make the right choices, work hard, and stay hopeful, life will reward us with peace. Yet, sooner or later, that illusion shatters. The people we love disappear. The plans we built collapse. What once felt certain turns to dust in our hands. Most people respond by trying to bargain with reality. They fight what has already happened, curse the weight they must carry, and search endlessly for a version of life that doesn't hurt so much. All this resistance drains them. It leaves them bitter, fragile, and afraid of the very world they inhabit. Friedrich Nietzsche believed this constant refusal to accept suffering was a deeper tragedy than suffering itself. To him, pain was not an error in the system. It was part of the structure of existence. And those who spent their lives fleeing it were rejecting life itself. His answer was as shocking as it was liberating. Embrace everything. Love every blow, every humiliation, every loss as if you had chosen it. He called this defiant posture Amor Fati, the love of one's fate. It is not passive resignation. It is a fierce act of affirmation, a decision to stop waiting for life to be kind and start meeting it on its own terms. When you can love what happens, not just endure it, you stop being life's victim and start becoming its equal. From the moment we become aware of ourselves, we begin an unspoken negotiation with life. We dream, we plan, we build, and we expect the world to respond in kind. Yet time and again, reality answers with silence or with violence. People betray us. Efforts collapse. Illness steals our strength. Even the most carefully constructed plans disintegrate under forces far beyond our control. And when that happens, most of us do the same thing. We resist. We try to rewrite what has already been written. We rage at the past and demand explanations from a universe that does not explain itself. This resistance is understandable. It is a deeply human instinct, the refusal to surrender to forces that humble us. But Nietzsche believed this instinct was precisely what keeps us trapped in suffering. The wound inflicted by fate cuts deeply, but the real torment begins when we spend years clawing at it, wishing it had never happened. In that endless struggle against what is, we drain our vitality and diminish our will. Life becomes a courtroom, and we cast ourselves as its plaintiff, forever pleading for a different verdict. Amor Fati stands as a direct challenge to this posture. It is a call to abandon the illusion that life owes us anything, and instead to embrace reality as it unfolds, entirely, unapologetically, without condition. To practice Amor Fati is to look at every event, pleasant or brutal, and affirm it as part of a necessary design. The heartbreak that emptied you, the failure that humiliated you, the betrayal that shattered your faith. None of these are detours from your path. They are the path. This affirmation is not born of naivety or weakness. It is an act of immense strength, a decision to stop viewing the world as a thing to be controlled and start seeing it as a thing to be affirmed. The courage to say yes is not passive acceptance. It is an active embrace, a deliberate turning toward reality in all its harshness. It is the willful choice to see meaning in the blows of fate rather than being crushed beneath them. Nietzsche described this yes as the highest expression of the human spirit. The person who has learned to affirm existence does not divide life into good and bad, desirable and detestable. They stand before the totality of their experience, the triumphs and the humiliations, the joys and the devastations, and welcome all of it as essential. Every event becomes a thread in the larger tapestry of becoming. Every scar becomes part of the sculpture of the self. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is meaningless. To reach this state requires an inner transformation. It demands that we abandon the language of should and should not, that we stop torturing ourselves with fantasies of how things might have been. Every "if only" is a chain that binds us to a reality that never existed. Every "what if" robs the present of its power. The moment we release those chains, we begin to reclaim our strength. What once felt like punishment begins to look like preparation. What once seemed arbitrary begins to reveal its purpose. This shift in perspective alters everything. A failed relationship stops being a personal tragedy and becomes a lesson in depth and discernment. A rejection ceases to be an indictment of your worth and transforms into an invitation to refine your craft. Even suffering itself, the kind that seems senseless, starts to serve a purpose when you approach it with affirmation. It tempers your character, hardens your resolve, deepens your understanding. Life, once seen as a hostile force, begins to appear as a teacher. The courage to say yes is rare, because it leaves no room for self-pity. It requires that we stop waiting for the world to hand us ideal conditions and begin shaping ourselves amid the chaos. It asks us to stop measuring life against what we expected, and instead, engage fully with what we have been given. This is the strength Nietzsche admired, the strength of those who refuse to be defined by circumstances, and instead, use circumstances to define themselves. In this light, the events you once wished away become indispensable. They cease to be stains on your story and instead emerge as the very lines that give it shape. Without them, you would be shallower, softer, smaller. With them, you are forged. And in that realization, the yes grows deeper, no longer a reluctant concession, but a fierce declaration. I would choose this life again. Every wound, every heartbreak, every triumph, every fall. I would choose it all. When Nietzsche wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati," that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. He was not offering comfort. He was offering freedom. The person who can utter those words sincerely is no longer ruled by resentment or regret. They stand shoulder to shoulder with fate itself, unafraid of what tomorrow may bring, because they have already said yes to everything it could possibly contain. Every life contains moments that feel unbearable. Betrayals that shatter trust, failures that humiliate, tragedies that leave us hollow. These moments do more than wound us. They challenge the story we tell ourselves about how the world should work. Somewhere in that story, we believe that if we act correctly, life will reward us. Effort should lead to success. Love should be returned. Justice should prevail. When the world refuses to follow this script, our faith in it begins to fracture. Into that fracture seeps a slow, toxic emotion: resentment. Resentment is easy to miss because it often wears the mask of righteousness. It tells us we have been wronged, that our suffering is proof of the universe's injustice. It clings to the idea that the past could have been different, and that someone, ourselves, others, fate itself, is to blame for its failure to align with our expectations. But beneath that surface narrative lies something smaller and more corrosive. Resentment is the refusal to accept reality on its own terms. It is the decision to keep fighting what has already happened. Nietzsche saw resentment as one of the most debilitating forces in human life. He called it resentment, not just anger at the past, but an entire worldview built upon rejection. It transforms us from creators into reactors. Instead of shaping our lives, we become defined by the very things we hate. Every grievance becomes a cage. Every memory of injustice turns into a chain we drag with us. And as those chains accumulate, our will to act grows weaker. The deeper danger of resentment lies in how it distorts our relationship with power. It tricks us into believing we are powerless because we were once powerless. We begin to measure our potential by our wounds. A betrayal convinces us to trust less. A failure convinces us to aim lower. A tragedy convinces us to stop trying altogether. Slowly, resentment rewrites our identity. We cease to see ourselves as agents of change and start seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance. The past becomes our master. At the heart of this condition is a fundamental illusion, the belief that we were ever fully in control. We convince ourselves that if we had made different choices or been treated differently, our lives would look the way we imagined. Yet the truth, as Nietzsche reminds us, is far more humbling. We control far less than we think. We cannot dictate the actions of others, the timing of fate, or the inevitable decay of everything we build. The weather will change without asking us. People will leave without warning. The ground beneath us will shift when we least expect it. Existence unfolds according to its own rhythm, indifferent to our preferences. Once this truth is faced directly, resentment loses much of its power. The anger we feel toward the past begins to look misguided, almost absurd. How can we rage against what could never have been otherwise? How can we despise what was always beyond our reach? The problem was never the event itself. It was our refusal to accept its necessity. The energy we spend resisting what has already occurred is energy stolen from what still can be created. Amor Fati offers a way out of this trap. It begins with a simple but profound act: releasing the demand that the past should have been different. This release is not a denial of pain. It is an acknowledgement that the past belongs to the realm of the unchangeable. Every second spent trying to rewrite it is a second lost from shaping the present. Once we stop demanding that reality answer to our expectations, we begin to recover the power resentment had stolen from us. This recovery transforms suffering itself. Events that once seemed senseless start to reveal their function. The heartbreak becomes the catalyst for deeper love. The rejection becomes the turning point that redirects us toward our real purpose. The humiliation becomes the lesson that sharpens our strength. The facts of the past do not change. They remain as they are, but our relationship with them does. They cease to define us and instead begin to serve us. This shift is not easy. It demands a level of humility that few people ever reach. It requires us to admit how small our sphere of control truly is, and to make peace with that smallness. Yet in this humility lies an unexpected liberation. When we no longer waste ourselves raging at the immovable, we are free to pour everything into the part of life that still responds to our will. Resentment collapses, and in its place grows responsibility, the fierce awareness that our response to fate is still ours to command. Every human life is shaped by forces we do not choose. Time erodes our bodies. Loss rearranges our hearts. Failure humbles our ambitions. These forces do more than mark us. They sculpt us. And yet when suffering arrives, our first instinct is to treat it as an interruption. We see it as something that delays the real story of our lives. A cruel detour we must somehow survive before we can begin living again. This way of thinking blinds us to one of existence's deepest truths. Pain is not a detour. It is the path itself. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this more clearly than almost anyone. His life was a catalog of afflictions: chronic illness, isolation, ridicule, heartbreak. His body often failed him. His work was dismissed while he lived. His mind eventually collapsed under the weight of its own intensity. Yet out of this relentless suffering emerged one of the most powerful bodies of thought ever written. Nietzsche did not endure pain as something meaningless. He treated it as raw material, something to be shaped and transformed into insight. He became proof that suffering is not merely something to be endured. It can become a source of creation. To understand this transformation, we must see suffering for what it is: concentrated reality. It strips away illusions faster than any comfort ever could. It tears down the fragile scaffolding of ego, exposes the limits of control, and forces us to confront the depth of what it means to exist. Pain carries information that pleasure conceals. It reveals what we value, what we fear, and what we still need to grow beyond. In this way, suffering functions as a mirror, one that shows us, often brutally, who we truly are beneath the stories we tell ourselves. The key is how we meet it. The same force that crushes one person can awaken another. Suffering is neutral energy. It will consume or create depending on how it is used. If we respond to it with despair, it will hollow us out. If we respond with blame, it will calcify into bitterness. If we respond with avoidance, it will follow us in silence, unresolved and untransformed. But if we approach it as a forge, if we step willingly into its fire, it can become the instrument of our evolution. Pain does not guarantee growth, but it offers the conditions in which growth becomes possible. Examples of this transformation surround us. The writer who loses everything and learns to build meaning from words. The survivor of catastrophe who dedicates their life to easing the suffering of others. The thinker who wrestles with despair and distills it into philosophy. In each case, pain was not an obstacle to greatness. It was the catalyst. It forced a deeper confrontation with existence, and, through that confrontation, carved a more powerful self into being. The crucible of suffering burned away weakness, complacency, and illusion, leaving behind something more resilient than comfort could ever produce. Nietzsche believed that without suffering, the human spirit remains shallow. Ease breeds stagnation. Predictability dulls the will. A life insulated from difficulty produces people who crumble at the slightest resistance. Struggle, on the other hand, stretches the boundaries of what we think we can endure. It forces us to draw on inner resources we did not know we possessed. It transforms strength from a theoretical virtue into a living reality. The virtues most admired, courage, patience, resilience, wisdom, are never gifts handed down from above. They are forged in adversity and tempered by pain. This is why Amor Fati extends beyond mere acceptance. To love one's fate is to welcome suffering as a collaborator in one's becoming. It means standing before pain without resentment and recognizing its role in shaping the self. The blow that humbles you becomes the lesson that grounds you. The heartbreak that empties you becomes the space where depth grows. The collapse that strips everything away becomes the soil in which purpose takes root. Every event, once seen as hostile, becomes part of the alchemy that transforms weakness into strength. To live this way changes your relationship with fear. Pain no longer looms as a threat to be avoided at all costs. It becomes an arena in which your highest potential is revealed. The losses you once dreaded still hurt, but they no longer define you. The failures you once feared still sting, but they no longer reduce you. Suffering ceases to be something that diminishes life, and instead becomes something that enlarges it. In this transformation, you stop asking, "How do I avoid the fire?" and start asking, "What will I become when I walk through it?" The forge does not offer comfort. It offers rebirth, and rebirth is always violent. The seed must break to grow. The metal must be melted to be reshaped. The old self must dissolve to make way for the new. This is the hidden promise inside pain, the guarantee that something greater can emerge from it if we have the courage to endure the heat. Nietzsche's entire philosophy points toward this truth, that strength, depth, and greatness do not emerge in spite of suffering. They emerge through it. And so the task is clear. When pain arrives, do not shrink from it. Do not curse it as meaningless. Do not waste your energy trying to erase it. Step into it with the will to be transformed. Allow it to carve away what is false, to expose what is essential, to shape what is yet to come. Every blow is a sculptor's strike. Every scar is a line in the story of who you are becoming. Every moment of suffering is a chance to rise beyond the person you were before it arrived. The cage dissolves the moment you stop treating pain as an intruder and begin treating it as a craftsman. Within its fire lies the possibility of your highest self, a self that no misfortune can destroy, a self that no loss can erase. This is the essence of Amor Fati. To love fate is to love the forge. And in that love, you discover a power that suffering can no longer touch. Life will never stop testing you. It will take, it will break, and it will demand that you rise again and again. Yet once you stop wishing for a gentler world and learn to love fate exactly as it is, you become untouchable. Suffering ceases to be a sentence and becomes the raw material of your strength. That is the gift of Amor Fati, not escape from pain, but transformation through it. If this philosophy spoke to something inside you, stay with us. Subscribe, and keep walking deeper into these ideas. The journey doesn't end here, it begins. Every time you have the courage to say yes.